So, what are the top 6 types of distilled alcohol? That's a really big question, and it's one we're going to try and answer today. I'm Jeff, this is G Whiskey. Stick around. So, alcohol is something we've been making for thousands upon thousands of years. In fact, it predates the pyramids, and today you'll find it in nearly endless varieties. It's in food preparation, it's in medicine, and of course we consume it directly as a drink, where we appreciate it for its flavor, for its intoxicating properties, and for helping me chat up girls at the bar. Does that ever go well for me? No, not really, but it does help me make the approach. Anyway, we will be looking at alcohol today, but we're not looking at wine, we're not looking at beer, we're looking at stuff that has been distilled. So it's been first fermented and then distilled into a high-proof spirit. And of course, even with spirits, there's an endless variety out there, but there are 6 common base spirits that we're going to be looking at today. So what I'll be doing is I'll be going over them, I'll be explaining them a little bit, and I'll be ranking them. So that should be fun. Now, of course, I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is not a definitive list. This is an opinion. It is my opinion. You are allowed to think differently. Maybe you have a different ranking of these, which is great. So, just be cool, man. Anyway, that's the premise. As usual, guys, I do have a mystery pour in my glass here. This one is a cocktail, so it's not a spirit today. This one is my second favorite cocktail. I do have one that is my first favorite, or as some people might call it, favorite. And we will actually be talking about that one as well in a little bit. Your hint for today as to what's in the glass, if you can make that out, I've got an orange peel in there, and I've also added some Angostura bitters. So that's your hint. Good luck with that. And I guess that is all of our bases covered. Let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into our list, into our ranking. In the meantime, if you'll kindly leave a like down below, that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so starting our list off at the bottom at number 6, we've got vodka. And I'm sure that's going to ruffle some Eastern European feathers, but there's a simple reason for that. And that's just that vodka is the least eventful spirit on this list. You can make vodka out of pretty much anything. You can use grains, you can use potatoes, etc. Vodka does not need to be aged and usually isn't. And for me, the reason vodka is at the bottom of this list isn't that there aren't some great vodkas out there. There are. It's more just about the purpose that vodka serves. Vodka is supposed to be a neutral spirit, and it's generally designed to be as smooth as possible because the vast amount of vodka out there gets consumed either in cocktails or as shots. That said, you can enjoy vodka however you want to enjoy it, but if you pour vodka into a glass and sip it slowly, I don't know what to tell you. Stay away from me and my family. But yeah, the general idea with vodka is the less burn, the better, the smoother, the better. And while there are some connoisseurs out there that are concerned with flavor and texture, those people are definitely in the minority, and ultimately vodka is just designed to be a neutral spirit, which makes it the least flavorful, and therefore for me, the least interesting on this list, which is why I've got it at the bottom. Still, that said, there are some vodkas that I like more than others, even though I'm very much not a vodka expert. If I'm looking for a cheap mixer, I'll often buy Finlandia. And if I'm having my Slavic buddies over and we're going to be doing shots and I want something a little bit fancier, I'll usually pop a bottle of Beluga in the freezer. And yeah, I think Beluga is probably the best vodka I've ever had. Not that I really care. At number 6, vodka. Coming in at number 5, I've got tequila. Now, growing up, I didn't really like tequila, or more like tequila didn't really like me. This was back when I was young and I was kind of drinking whatever and I didn't really care. And I remember at least a couple times where I got properly sick from the stuff. If you don't know much about tequila, tequila is of course out of Mexico and it's made using distilled agave. Now, the blanket term we could use is mezcal, and then underneath that we have a specific type of mezcal, and that is tequila. Tequila needs to be made using a specific type of agave, and it needs to be from specific regions. And we'll leave it there. You guys can Google the rest. But yeah, like I said, this stuff made me pretty sick a couple times. Although, to be fair, I think that's more my fault than the tequila's fault. Tequila is one of those spirits that's getting more and more interesting over the years. Back when I was young, when I was growing up, it was all about shots of like Sauza or Jose Cuervo, or if I'd recently been paid, maybe Patron. But nowadays, in the last few years especially, we've seen this huge explosion of craft, carefully made tequilas. These tequilas are more natural. They don't have additives. They're more sophisticated. They're designed to be sipped instead of shot. So it's interesting. We have tequila kind of slowly creeping up on other fine-aged spirits in terms of quality. One of the few craft tequilas that I've had and enjoyed was El Tesoro 80th. That was pretty good. It wasn't whiskey, but it was pretty good. But sadly for me, here in East Asia, tequila is not really a thing. Or I should say enthusiast tequila is really not a thing. I mean, we do get some of the big brand stuff, but even then, not much. But tequila, or interest in tequila, is kind of growing internationally. Obviously, it's going to be huge in Mexico and huge in the United States. But you even have parts of Europe that are kind of looking for more and more interesting tequilas. So even though craft tequila is pretty far from being internationally available, let's just hope that the scene continues to flourish, people continue buying it, the producers continue making it, and you never know, someday tequila might actually be known as a sipping spirit instead of something you shoot. We can hope. Comes in at number 5, tequila. At number 4, I've got gin. Now, here's the thing about gin. I think objectively, I probably should have put it at number 5 and had tequila a little bit higher at number 4. But the truth is, I just haven't had enough tequila. Or I should say, I haven't had enough good tequila. So it's not really a spirit I'm familiar with. But that said, I do think it's got more potential than gin. But for now, I'm more familiar with gin. I've had plenty of it, and it serves as the foundation for my all-time favorite cocktail, and that's the G&T. So gin is naturally a mixer. Of course, you could sip it or you could shoot it. Once again, if you do that, you're weird. But personally, I pretty much only use it for G&Ts. But here's the thing about gin. You can have all different types of gin. So even if you're just having G&T after G&T after G&T, if you mix it, well, number one, don't do that. But if you mix up the gins, you're actually having a very different cocktail experience. Beyond that, you can get creative with your garnishes. So there's actually a lot of ways to spice up your G&Ts. Now, first we should talk about what gin is. So gin is, it's basically vodka with jazz hands. It's usually an unaged spirit distilled from grain, wheat, or barley, and then it's going to be infused with herbs. Now, pretty much any gin is going to have juniper berries in there, but then you're going to have any kind of combination of different herbs, usually local to the distillery. The best gins, like everything else on this list, are fully natural, and even if we're keeping our ingredients fully natural, we can end up with some pretty wild results. So these are fully natural gins. They taste different, and they look different. I mean, obviously. Now, my favorite gin happens to be the most commercial gin out there, and that's Hendrick's out of Scotland. My second favorite gin is The Botanist, also out of Scotland. That one's from the Bruichladdich distillery, if you're a whiskey fan. But if I want something more affordable and easy to find, Bombay Sapphire does the trick for me. You don't need fancy premium gins. You can just use some of the more commercial stuff. You put it in a G&T. G&Ts are pretty straightforward. They're hard to muck up, but still, it is a lot of fun exploring the world of gin and all the flavors we get in there. So it comes in at number 4. Gin. At number 3, we've got rum, and rum is another one of those spirits that didn't used to be a really big enthusiast thing. I mean, I guess there was like a subculture for it. Can we call it subculture? Like, there's always been people who enjoyed finer rums, but like tequila, you've had this huge craft explosion in the rum world in the last, let's say, decade or so. These are rums that are made specifically for sippers and enthusiasts. These are not cocktail fodder. These have age and complexity. Once again, as you know, the best ones are going to be fully natural. Now, rum is made from sugar cane. Now, you can make it using sugar cane juice or molasses, but it's all from sugar cane. And unless you're talking about white rums, which are more for cocktails, typically we are going to have some kind of aging happening. Usually that'll happen in ex-bourbon barrels, but really it could be anything. It could be in a steel tank, it could be in my Uncle Frank's bathtub, or really just any cask of your choosing. Now, rum is probably the most global spirit in terms of production. You have loads of tropical countries that make their own local rum. There are even some non-tropical countries, but for the most part, the biggest production, the most famous area for producing rum is the Caribbean. But outside of that, you have plenty of other places producing rum, places like India, Australia, the Philippines, the United States, even Canada. I do not know what we're doing on this list. Anyway, for recommendations, I suggest you guys check out stuff like Hampton Estate or Foursquare. Those are very big, very well-known brands, but they make fantastic stuff. I can't say that I'm very plugged into the rum scene, but I would like to be. It's something I want to explore more. But what I can tell you is that there are rums in production out there that can surpass a well-aged single malt whiskey. So they are getting that good. It's a great spirit. It's definitely worth exploring. Comes in at number 3, rum. At number 2, I've got brandy. Now, I think a lot of people out there would put rum higher than brandy, but it's my list and I love me a good brandy. Brandy is a very fine sipping spirit. My favorite, and I think most people's favorite type of brandy is, of course, French brandy. And that's just because France has a lot of rules that ensure quality. So you have these major brandy producing regions like Cognac or Armagnac, and they have to follow these rigid set of rules. But that's just so you know you have a very strong baseline of quality there. Now, brandy is just spirit that has been distilled from grapes, and internationally you can pretty much bend the rules any which way as long as you're starting with grapes. But if you look at places like France, so if you take Cognac for example, a Cognac has to be double distilled in a pot still and then aged for a minimum of 2 years. Or you could take something like Armagnac, which is distilled in a column still, aged for a minimum of 1 year. Personally, I'm a huge Armagnac fan. It's a little bit more rugged and maybe a little bit more pushy than a lot of cognacs out there. My go-to from Armagnac right now is the cask strength line from Tariquet. Now, Tariquet is one of the bigger Armagnac houses, so it should be more widely available than a lot of other stuff. Personally, I recommend the cask strength 15, but pretty much anything from the cask strength line at all, the cask strength series, is going to be something good. Now, any brandy, unsurprisingly, is going to give you some grapey notes, but beyond that, you can have countless combinations of things like fruits, florals, spices, and oak. The better ones are well aged, they offer complexity, they offer subtlety, and I have had some brandies just absolutely floor me. I think it is one of the finest spirits in the world. It comes in at number 2, brandy. Number 1 is whiskey, which is pretty obvious. I did not name the channel G Tequila. Now, I do like all types of whiskey, but of course my favorite is single malt whiskey, which is made using malted barley. Some of the best single malts in the world are, of course, out of Scotland, where after distillation, they have to be aged for a minimum of 3 years in oak casks. And needless to say, I think this is the finest spirit in the world. The endless array of flavors, the complexity, the richness, the nuance that you can get never ceases to amaze. So I think it's unmatched. If you want recommendations, well, I've got an entire channel of those. Number 1, of course, whiskey. All right, that was my list. That was my ranking of the top 6 distilled spirits in the world, and I want to hear from you. What are your favorite distilled spirits? Now, I went with the 6 most common base spirits, but you can play around with the idea a little bit. So maybe you like Calvados, which is distilled apples. That's cool. Point is, I want to know what your favorite spirits in the world are, how you would rank them. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, is that the only correct answer for number 1 is whiskey. Obviously, I'm kidding. No, I'm not. All right, so finally, for those of you who stuck around to find out what my mystery pour in the glass is here, I give you a couple hints. We've got some orange peel in there. I added some Angostura bitters. The cocktail I've got in my glass is an old-fashioned. Now, typically, old-fashions are made using either bourbon or rye. I'm using a blended scotch. I've got monkey shoulder here. But really, for old-fashions, you can get creative. You can use pretty much any spirit you want. It's a fun cocktail. Obviously, it works well for whiskey lovers, or you could even make one with a brandy base if you want to. But if you like whiskey or if you like brandy and you want to keep those flavors relatively intact and not overwhelm them with like cola or anything like that, yeah, old fashions. Old fashions are great. And that brings us to the end of our video today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to help out the channel, I do have both Patreon and PayPal linked down below. Anything and everything helps, and I'm looking forward to reading the comments under today's video. Should be fun, should be an interesting read. So on that note, I guess I'll leave you, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, guys.